You're tuned in because you want the important stuff without wading through everything else, right?
Absolutely.
Well, let's get right to it. Today we're diving into something pretty significant. A big change announced April 10th, 2025. It's about how new medicines get evaluated here in the US.
That's right. It's a major move by the FDA. They're planning to phase out the requirement for animal testing for certain drugs.
Hmm.
We're talking things like monoclonal antibodies, a really key area.
Phase out animal testing? That sounds huge.
It is, and it's not a minor tweak. It's really rethinking the approval pathway for these therapies.
And there's a reason behind it, obviously. The FDA's press release, which is our main source today, says this isn't just a procedural thing.
No, definitely not. The goals are pretty ambitious. They're talking about boosting drug safety, for one,
Okay, safety.
and speeding up the whole evaluation process, which, can take ages.
Right, it's notoriously long.
Exactly. Plus, potentially cutting down those huge R&D costs.
Which could mean lower drug prices.
That's the ultimate hope, yes. So, better safety, faster approvals, lower costs. It's a lot riding on this change.
It really is. The FDA is even calling it a paradigm shift. So our mission today is to unpack that. What does the shift actually mean for new medicines? Why now?
Let's dig in.
Okay, so animal testing. It's been the standard for decades, hasn't it? It's just what happens.
It has been, yes, a standard part of the preclinical phase.
But now the FDA is saying, for these specific drugs anyway, maybe that's not always the best way. That it has limits.
Precisely. The core idea they're putting forward is that animal models aren't always human relevant. That's the term they're using.
Human relevant, meaning?
Meaning that animal biology isn't identical to ours. Sometimes a drug acts very differently in a dog or a primate than it does in a person.
So the results don't always translate reliably.
Exactly. You can miss potential problems or maybe even discard a drug that would have worked in humans. So the FDA is acknowledging this gap and pushing towards methods that give, well, more directly, human data.
Which leads us to these new methods they mentioned. NMs. New approach methodologies. Sounds quite techy.
It does, yeah. But NMs are essentially just advanced techniques that aim to predict safety and effectiveness without relying on traditional animal studies.
Okay, so what are these techniques? They mentioned a couple of types.
Right, two main categories they're really encouraging. First, there are AI-based computational models.
AI models. So software predicting drug effects. How reliable can that actually be?
Well, it's pretty sophisticated stuff. These models analyze a drug's structure, its molecular properties, and they simulate how it might behave in the human body.
Simulate distribution.
Interactions. Exactly. Based on vast amounts of biological data and computational power, they can predict how a drug might spread through the body, how it might interact with cells, and, crucially, flag potential side effects.
So identifying risks before it even gets near a living system.
That's the goal.
Yep.
The FDA thinks this could drastically reduce the need for animal trials because you can run these complex simulations first. It's like a virtual screening process.
A virtual trial. Wow. Okay, and the second type of NAM, human-based lab models.
Yeah, this is fascinating too. Think tiny, lab-grown human tissues or organs.
Like mini organs in a dish.
Sort of. You've got organoids, which are these 3D clusters of human cells. They can mimic the basic structure and function of, say, a liver or heart tissue or parts of the immune system. And then you have organ-on-a-chip technology. That's even more complex, microengineered systems that simulate the environment inside an organ, like blood flow, mechanical stress, cell interactions.
So you can test the drug directly on something that closely resembles a human organ, just miniature.
Precisely. And the FDA's point is that this gives you a more direct window into human responses. You might catch toxicity issues that wouldn't show up in an animal because the underlying biology is human.
That makes intuitive sense. More direct human data should be more predictive for humans.
That's the core argument.
And it sounds like this isn't just theoretical. The FDA wants companies using these NMs now.
Yes, that's a key takeaway. They're encouraging companies to submit data from NOMs in their investigational new drug applications, the INDs, starting immediately.
INDs. That's the application to start human trials, right?
Correct. So even before you get to human testing, the FDA is saying, show us your names data. It signals they're serious about incorporating this right away.
Okay, so we have AI models, mini organs. What about using data from, actual humans? They mentioned leveraging real-world data, too.
Right. This ties back to efficiency and avoiding redundant testing. The FDA says they'll put more weight on existing safety data from other countries.
Other countries, how does that work?
If a drug has already been studied or even approved and used in humans in a country with, say, comparable regulatory standards, think Europe, Canada, places like that, the FDA will lean more on that existing human safety and efficacy data.
Ah, so if it's already shown to be safe in lots of people elsewhere.
Then maybe you don't need to repeat certain animal tests that has sometimes been done just to tick a box. The FDA actually noted that manufacturers sometimes perform additional animal testing of drugs that have data in broad human use internationally.
That seems inefficient.
They can be. So this is about being smarter, using the human evidence that already exists globally, assuming a regulatory oversight is comparable.
Makes sense. Avoid duplication, learn from existing experience. It all points toward streamlining things.
Definitely. And that leads into what the FDA Commissioner, Martin McCary, called the win-win scenario.
Right, the benefits. What did he highlight?
First, and arguably most important, faster development of safer treatments for patients.
Safer and faster. How do names achieve both?
The thinking is human-relevant models might spot safety issues specific to humans earlier, or gives stronger signals of effectiveness, potentially shortening the overall development time. Safer because the tests are more predictive for humans.
Okay, that's a big potential win for patients. What else?
Second, a major one, the reduction in animal use. This is significant ethically.
How many animals are we talking about?
The commissioner mentioned potentially sparing thousands of animals, including dogs and primates, each year as these methods take hold.
Thousands. That's a substantial impact on animal welfare.
It really is. And the third part of the win-win.
Let me guess. Cost.
You got it. Lower research and development costs and drug prices.
Yeah.
Animal studies are expensive, they take time, require specialized facilities.
So if names are more efficient or cheaper,
The hope is that those savings in R&D could eventually translate into more affordable medicines for everyone. That's a major goal.
safer, faster, fewer animals used, and potentially cheaper drugs. It sounds almost too good to be true. How are they actually going to make this happen? Just encouraging companies isn't always enough.
True. So the FDA is updating its formal guidelines. They're making it official that NAMS data will be considered. But crucially, they're also dangling a carrot. Yeah, the possibility of streamlined review for companies that submit strong non-animal data packages.
Ah, so a faster track through the approval process if you use these new methods effectively.
Exactly. That's a powerful incentive for companies to invest in and adopt NAMs. If it potentially gets your drug reviewed quicker, that's a huge advantage.
Okay, that makes sense. Incentivize the change. And how does this position the U.S. globally? Are others doing this?
The FDA is definitely framing this as leading the charge, reaffirming its role as a global leader in modern regulatory science. They're setting a benchmark, really.
So kind of pushing the envelope internationally.
You could say that. They also mentioned this aligns with growing calls from Congress and the scientific community for more human-relevant methods. So it's responding to a broader trend, too.
And they're not doing this in a vacuum, right? They mentioned collaborations.
Yes, very important. They're working closely with other big federal players, the NIH, the National Toxicology Program, the VA, through a group called ICCV, the Interagency Coordinating Committee, on the validation of alternative methods. It's basically the government's hub for validating these kinds of new testing approaches. Ensures everyone's coordinated.
Good, so a joined-up approach. And they're planning a workshop.
Yeah, a public workshop later this year. That'll be key for hashing out the details, getting input from industry, researchers, animal welfare groups, all the stakeholders.
Essential for a smooth rollout, I imagine. Speaking of rollout, how quickly is this happening? Is it all systems go tomorrow?
It's more of a phased approach.
Yeah.
They're starting with a pilot program within the next year.
A pilot program for whom?
Specifically for select developers of monoclonal antibodies. They'll get to use primarily non-animal strategies, but with close FDA guidance.
Testing the waters, basically.
Right. They'll run a study alongside it, see what works, what challenges arise. The findings from that pilot will then shape the broader policy changes and guidance updates.
So it'll roll out gradually, informed by this initial experience.
That seems to be the plan.
Careful, but definitely moving forward. Okay, so let's just quickly recap. Big announcement, April 10th, 2025. The FDA is shifting away from required animal testing for monoclonal antibodies and similar drugs.
Correct. Driven by the push for safer, faster, potentially cheaper drugs, and ethical concerns about animal use.
And they're pushing these new approach methodologies, NAMs. Things like AI modeling, organoids, organs on chips.
Yep, leveraging cutting-edge tech, plus making smarter use of existing human data from around the world.
With incentives like streamlined review, collaboration across agencies, and a pilot program starting soon.
That covers the key pieces. It's a significant move towards more modern, human-focused regulatory science.
It really does make you pause and think, doesn't it? This shift towards AI, towards these sophisticated lab models. What kind of evidence will we rely on in, say, 10 or 20 years to say a drug is safe? It feels like the very nature of proof in medicine might be evolving.
It's a profound question. This decision absolutely reflects where science and technology are heading, a deeper grasp of human biology meeting powerful new tools. It suggests a future where hopefully our scientific progress goes hand in hand with more ethical and potentially just better ways of ensuring public health. Definitely something to keep watching as the FDA releases more details on how this rolls out.